A very warm welcome to everyone to our fourth Innovators Club meeting. It's a virtual format, and I'm very grateful for all of you to join. And special thanks to the panelists, for taking out time and agreeing to build this conversation with us. So before we start the program, I would like to invite Dr. VK Singh to share a few words with all of us and set the context. Sir, over to you, sir.
Okay, thank you, Sachin. Thank you, Sachin, and I welcome all the panelists who are devoting their time for the good cause, and also all the people who are attending that they will be benefited by today's exchange of thought from the panelists. I just wanted to mention to you that we thought at InnovatorCLUB, this is some activities we should have, which is knowledge platform from credible people, from reliable people, and pass it on this experience and knowledge to others. And that is how this club was born. It is not for profit activity, and that is for the members and sometimes for others. Today we are open for everyone because artificial intelligence is another buzzword. It started with cybersecurity, digital India, and now it is artificial intelligence, which is there. We are already into it, and then we have developed a training program, which we are also now going to have it online training program. We are doing virtual with the PHFI, where Dr. Vibha spoke, and she was lauded by the people that doctor is talking something on artificial intelligence, and that is what really was done very well. So the whole issue at large was that we have created a course of 5 days. We have also got an awareness training program on Udemy. We also going to have program on the online, which is under development. We have developed that cybersecurity on the Prime Minister's office. The coordinator of the cyber at the national level had inaugurated. So the one we did it, and another one which will be doing it. So we are into the training of those kind which are not accessible to the healthcare providers. Now we understand that this has to be the next training program. We have done two for cyber, one for cyber and two for the training program on artificial intelligence, where Dr. Vibha was there already. And this is what is the idea is to take it to the next level. There are many things which you may like to contribute. We have a magazine which goes to 86,000 people. Write an article, your viewpoint. Yes, we are starting a fresh section on that. Is a startup. We have done the virtual events for the Government of India hackathon, which the Prime Minister inaugurated. Where Sachin and his team have done a wonderful job, and they have done all technical aspect and technology aspect, in addition to Ideathon, etc. So this is, we would like our members and other people to be with us in these activities. Some are not for profit and some are for minimal profit, etc. Now we are going through a stage of the pandemic, COVID-19. It is replicated after 100 years with Spanish flu is the one which really came up in 1916, 1918, 2 years or so after 100 years. And same as that time, there were no vaccine, there was nothing except basic what we are doing today. Today we are slightly better. That's probably vaccine is the one which is going to be likely to come in a short while, as well as people are taking due precautions of mask, etc. I'll not repeat all this. But this is the one biological disaster. Nature has brought it. Is it many theories? Is it pollution? Is it climatic changes? Because there are books written. Climatic changes brought the dengue and other many viral diseases, etc. Whatever all said and done, This is a gift of modernity, maybe, but then there was no Spanish flu was not a modernity at that time. But what we can think of that IT and the health sector people has to join hand and find a solution to every good thing. But do remember, IT cannot replace the human touch and human hand. And that is what the really many clinicians feel, that computer fellow can do it, everything, and that is not possible. It is only to aid you, maybe telemedicine, maybe digital, maybe the artificial intelligence. Ultimately, final decision is the person who has done so many years, toiled there and seen it. He is the person who is really going to. Of course, the trend is changing now. We don't touch a patient, and ultimately everything is done by the various methods. The artificial intelligence is one method, but again, humanizing aspect should never be forgotten. I don't think any one of us would like computer to treat us. They will there to aid us, help us, and take it forward. After every difficult days, we always find there's a progress. It happened in Second World War, where many things were developed, war machinery developed, management principles like PERT, program evaluation review technique, and also many other things which really came up. Similarly, this is the time in post-COVID era, many things are happening and many things will bring to the humanity better things. I was reading yesterday, Kerala has all modernized its own schools. It is 12 lakhs in the schools which will have modern facility of online training, etc. So there are many things which we have learned. Our behavior changes have already taken place. We have switched over to this. We have switched over, no conference we have done. We have done a digital magazine or e-magazine. The physical club has gone into this. We will resume as soon as possible and as much as required. But this is what it is. I welcome everyone. I request, please be with us, support India, and take the initiative forward. It is good for everyone that put your views, and we will offer you all the platform. You can contact the person who have through where how you have already registered, and we are there to help you in every way. Thank you very much, and I'm sure this will benefit all the participants which have joined. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. VK Singh. Thank you for setting the context. And I feel very lucky and privileged that I have been joined by two uh, uh, experts like today in the program. So I think now we have all the panelists, although we cannot see Rohit, but I can assure all of you he's a real human being and he looks pretty much like all of us. So, a warm welcome from my side to all of you. And as I said, I feel very lucky to be in the company of experts like you. I just would like to say that in the four panelists that we have today, we are representing a wide variety of stakeholders from our society. Mr. P.R. Krishnan, who is the Executive Vice President in Tata Consultancy Services, represents one of the largest IT company from this country. Miss Dr. Vibha Jain, who is a clinician and is working with the Max Healthcare, represents a large publicly listed healthcare provider. Pranay, he's from National Health Authority, and in the last several years, I believe the commendable work that has been done by National Health Authority, I don't need to really introduce that, but Ayushman Bharat, I think, has been one of the flagship project of this government. And I think Pranay brings a very much of a helicopter view, looking at various, aspects of government's, initiatives in this country when it comes to healthcare. And last but not the least, Rohit, represents that new India, which is, basically creating new milestones. And their company Cure.ai has recently achieved an FDA certification for their artificial intelligence. I think first for India, and I think many lessons to be learned, from each of their journeys uh, in the healthcare domain. So a warm welcome to all of you, and let me, just request you to keep 2 points in mind when we are doing this conversation. One, there are a lot of people who want to be in the same position, which is to build, artificial intelligence solutions. So I request you to maybe open up the conversation in a way that enables other people to understand how they can also, be part of the artificial intelligence in healthcare story. Second, also, since you are representing diverse stakeholders, in India, we often don't see, heterogeneous people trying to partner with each other. I think in four of you, we have a unique opportunity that even four of you partner together, lot is possible. So I am sure that, a company like Rohit would definitely like to partner with a hospital like Max, or with a company like TCS, or with NHA. So I'm sure that these are permutations, combinations which are possible, and maybe we can also delve a bit more on building this ecosystem in this country. So let me start this conversation by inviting Mr. PRK, and we go in this order: Mr. PRK, then Dr. Vibha, then Pranay, and then Rohit. If I may ask all four of you to introduce yourself and maybe share your, viewpoint on AI in healthcare in India. So maybe take not more than 3-4 minutes. And over to you, Mr. PRK.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you, Sachin. This is indeed a pleasure to be in such a lead company and share my thoughts on AI. It has been a passion and my job, of course. I get paid for what I do on AI, and especially on the healthcare is one part of what I do from a domain perspective. But what I have learned in the past few years, I definitely feel AI is as an opportunity to transform healthcare in India. The reasons are, one is of course the technology part of it, where all of us know that there are algorithms, so deep learning algorithms or machine learning algorithms, which have been written and exploited fully by the technologies to be able to help the healthcare community. That's the technology part of it. More importantly, it is also that given the constraints in India in terms of healthcare, in terms of accessibility, in terms of the diverse population across the nation, and in terms of affordability. These are three things. And in terms of the ratio to doctors to patients, or hospital number of beds in hospital to the patients, these are also abysmally low. While we will work on increasing that number, even by 2030, experts predict it will still be much less than what WHO is recommending. So in that perspective, from a technology perspective, and being a technologist for the past 40 years, I felt that it is an opportunity for us to look at how can we improve the productivity per doctor against the ratio of patients. I think technology there are two parts to what AI can do. One is about able to improve the processes within a hospital, which is non-obtrusive, nothing to do with the patient per se. The second part is where we are able to look at data available across the patient community and see what we can determine in terms of predict diseases, and can we make their life easier for our patient to serve them better. These are my thoughts upfront, what I have learned in such forums, as well as what I have learned with my customers. One of the things my customers always would want to say is, can you do it by tomorrow? They think AI is magic. But we are not customers here. We are the people who are stakeholders who have to take care of the larger community of India and the patients in India. So we understand that in healthcare, magic does not happen. So that's a upfront feeling I have, whomever I have interacted with in terms of doctors and clinicians. They know that they could be skeptical, but they're also realistic in the sense magic does not happen. we need to work on it, and it is. And COVID-19 has proved that you can't find a vaccine day after tomorrow. Thank you. That was my introduction. I head the Enterprise Intelligent Automation and the AI for PCS globally. Been in the company for 38 years. Totally, I have 40 years of experience in technology, starting from the old legacy systems to AI. So it's been a fantastic journey. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I'm noting down some of the points you're mentioning, so I'll probably come back to you on them. And now I would like to invite Dr. Vibha. So, if, ma'am, you can introduce yourself and say a few words about your AI journey.
Good morning, everyone. And thank you, Sajid and Dr. VK, for actually inviting us to this particular good panel. The club has always provided a very good knowledge platform where we have been either in the audience or in the panel, there has been always a very good exchange of information and the knowledge which we have been able to utilize in the areas which we are working, and a very good kind of a conglomeration of the people from different areas, from different stakeholders, wherein the varied kind of experience that has helped us, and I'm sure that helps the participants as well. As regards my journey, you've already told I'm a clinician by profession, and it's almost a decade now. I've been interacting in the healthcare IT. It's an irony. If I see worldwide, the companies worldwide, they come to India in search of resources which are like available at a very low cost. But if you think of the healthcare, we still are feeling the crunch of resources here. So, it's kind of an irony. You come to Indian market searching for resources which are ample, but when you come to the healthcare, you don't have doctors, you don't have other healthcare workers who can help you out. And then technology comes in. That technology and that is something which I believe that has the power to actually empower the healthcare. Technology has the power to empower the healthcare, to do wonders and help the patients out there. Pandemic, yes, it has disrupted everything out everywhere, but in one or two cases, it has also come to the forefront that AI is something which is not a new technology. It has been in use, I think, in other industries for quite long time. But in healthcare, the utility of it, the benefit of it, that is actually, it has just come to the forefront during this pandemic. As regards the telemedicine also, the thing which in the healthcare, especially in the private sector, which we have been feeling is the lack of the guidance or the guidelines or the framework. So we just keep on using some European guidelines, or maybe in other markets, in lack of the guidelines out here. They take a little bit more time to formalize, to come to a position where we can utilize it and then adopt it in our settings. But this pandemic is actually it has just fast-tracked all those kind of stuff. So now you have telemedicine guidelines in place. We were struggling to have them in place for like last 5-6 years, probably, maybe more than that. But now, during the pandemic, it was, I think, only a month, and we were there with the guidelines. I'm hoping that there are some guidelines which come for the AI also, because it has a lot of potential to actually aid the already short staff in healthcare in terms of the clinicians, as well as the nursing staff and the paramedical staff, which actually due to the pandemic is also again going to a much less number. Most of the doctors and most of the nurses are getting impacted by COVID. So we are getting a lot of shorter staff over there. So I believe AI definitely would be able to help us out over
there. Thank you, Dr. Vibha. I think a lot of important points here, and this lack of guidelines is probably an important point that we can take later in this conversation. And with that, I would like to invite Pranay. Pranay, if you can share what's happening at NHA, how has been the last 6 months?
Thank you for the invite, Sachin, and thank you to the co-panelists for sharing your insights on how AI can be leveraged for improving the healthcare delivery. I am currently deputed to the National Health Authority on behalf of the Asian Development Bank, and I co-lead the National Health Authority Innovation Unit. Just for the benefit of all the attendees, National Health Authority manages 2 of the flagship programs of the Government of India. The first one is Ayushman Bharat Pradhan Mantri Jan Arogya Yojana, which essentially is an insurance scheme for 40% of India's population. And we have run that scheme since the past 2.5 years, close to 2 years, 3 months. In this span, we have treated more than 1.2 crore beneficiaries through a network of 23,000 hospitals in around 32, 33 states, union territories in the country. Recently, as you would be aware, on the Independence Day this year, the Honorable Prime Minister launched the National Digital Health Mission. And the mandate for running the National Digital Health Mission has also been given to the National Health Authority. So these are the two broader initiatives that we are running, and these initiatives are in line with the National Health Policy 2017. And I will take a step further in saying that India has been at a cusp of healthcare revolution in the last 2-3 years because of the mandate that has been given, because of the political leadership that has promoted healthcare to become a center of discussion, to be a forefront of the discussion when it comes to national narratives. And the schemes that are coming in place are going to pave a way for the integration of clinical and the technology bit that we were talking about. So just to go back to the discussion, the points that were mentioned about integration of clinical systems with the technology systems, I want to tell all the attendees that PMJ is a completely cashless and a paperless scheme, which is a manifestation of a very strong IT platform, an end-to-end IT platform that we have created. And secondly, when we are talking about National Digital Health Mission, it is essentially creation of those building blocks, which are then going to pave way for the next healthcare revolution that is going to come. Because NDHM, the mandate of NDHM is creating a health ID for 1 billion plus Indian citizens, creating a health registry for all the facilities that are there, creating a health registry for all the doctors that are there, and having those EHR, EMR records in place. And over and above all these things, maintaining a robust security privacy framework, right? So these are very ambitious steps that the government of India has taken in the past couple of years, and this is going to strongly augment emerging technologies to play a part in the journey of making healthcare technology available not only to the upper middle class or to the upper class, but making healthcare technology a norm when it comes to the poorest and the most vulnerable people in the country. Pertaining to what we do, what my team does at the NHA, so we run the NHA Innovation Unit, which essentially looks at how do we integrate the ideas and the solutions that startups are bringing or emerging technology players are bringing into the scheme delivery of Ayushman Bharat PMJ, and more recently into NDHM. So I'll just take a pause there and happy to explore more points as we go through in the discussion.
Great, Pranay. I think it's very heartening to hear all of this, and I've been telling Dr. VK Singh a lot about the opportunity the NDHM offers to India, because I think first time digital has become mainstream, and until now digital was more like a good to have or a kind of a force fit on healthcare. I think first time COVID has created a situation, and I can only imagine that 6 months from now, when vaccine would be given, if 1 billion people would be having those IDs, whether to have a vaccination certificate or whatever gives them mobility post vaccine. I can only imagine that without IT it is not possible. And in one shot, I think India would see a bigger logistics than the World War II, and maybe also a bigger uptake of digital than ever anywhere in the globe. But let me also point out to you that there is this person in the audience today. He's called Tarak Nagraj. So we did 3 hackathons during the lockdown. The very first hackathon, we found a very good startup which is run by Tarak, and I have been helping Tarak ever since we discovered him during the hackathon, and he's very excited about NDHM, and he's in Mumbai, and I think he's looking at your NDHM sandbox as well. So when I interact with people like Tarak, I realize that it is a ray of hope for people like him, this program of yours. And I feel that there should be maybe more hands-on, event or an activity which can invite startups from all over the country, and maybe in a workshop format, actually enable them to take the NDHM sandbox, because I find a lot of keenness from people like him, but maybe there is a bit of what do you say, lack of awareness, if I may say. So I really request you to consider that there are many startups in India which are willing to take jump on this bandwagon of NDHM, and I think you can really support them by doing some workshop, or I don't know, some kind of an open event which helps them.
Right, absolutely, Sachin. Point well taken. Just for the benefit of all the viewers, it has been around 2 months since the time Sandbox has been live. We have received around 300 applications as of now, and I think 250 applications have been processed. But at the same time, if you look at the overall plethora of healthcare startups that would want to contribute with the Sandbox, I think the number is definitely going to be higher, and it makes prudent sense for us to have those capacity building and to have those training workshops so as to reduce information asymmetry. So I think point well taken, and this is something that we'll definitely look forward to in the near future.
Yes, indeed, Pranay, and I believe that these 250, 300 startups may represent, best of India in a way, because they are coming on their own. And I would really wish to interact with these 250, 300 startups. So let us know if we can also contribute in some way, building a conversation with them, because this is really important. So
Absolutely.
now I want to invite Rohit. Rohit, if you have been listening patiently, can I request you to introduce yourself and also maybe make quick comment on what you just heard?
And probably in terms of, I've really been very patiently listening to everyone's point, not only the introductions, but also the very interesting points made by everyone. In terms of, I think personally, our experience, I'm probably the youngest on the block in terms of the number of years in healthcare, if that's the count. So Cure was something we started back in 2016, primarily out of Mumbai in India. And just to give you, I mean, this is primarily for everyone who's probably not aware of what Cure is and what Cure does. So Cure was started in 2016, last four and a half years. We started out of Mumbai. The first 2 years was primarily a lot of focus on building some of this R&D products that we actually use. So what we have done over the last 4 years is primarily build softwares which can look at medical images like chest X-rays or head CTs and other things like that, and interpret those using computer algorithms like AI. And I think what we have faced as a challenge is primarily that, I mean, we were the first ones of sort within India to start that back in 2016 when AI was not really a cool thing on the block. I mean, it was fairly still, people were exploring all of that. And from there onwards to where we are right now, I think there's been a fairly interesting long journey where we have faced a lot of interesting challenges in terms of first understanding the healthcare AI in healthcare applications itself, followed by understanding, and creating that awareness around making healthcare practitioners understand where the AI use case would primarily lie in, and then followed by obviously taking that not just within India but beyond India and sort of complying. So today we are, I think, almost in 27 different countries. So understanding what we could do in India and we could build for India to take that outside to the global audience was a very interesting learning for us as well. So absolutely happy to talk about that. I think Dr. Vibha also mentioned about how some of the regulations, get lacked within India. But when you go to a more global scenario, there's a lot of those kind of things. So we have faced those all sorts of challenges, I think, being a company based out of India. But I think one point just to finally add to this was, I think when we started, this was fairly something we always wanted to do was use AI to make healthcare more democratized, more accessible, more, people can do it even in remote areas, because we genuinely think that's where the value of AI lies, in it being an equalizer in sort of access to healthcare. And that's what we strongly work towards. And I think being based out of India actually has given us that opportunity to actually go and prove that to a good extent that we have done. In fact, during COVID as well. And absolutely happy to talk to everyone and understand and actually explore how. So that's primarily about it.
Thanks, Rohit. We are very proud of your achievements, and I also feel that Pranay, maybe if you were to make some special committees or focus groups, you may find a lot of people in this uh, audience in the webinar today itself, where a lot of information and knowledge is available. So I think what Rohit's company has done and achieved out of India uh, is really commendable, and I think a lot of lessons for many other startups to pick up. So I think we have successfully done the first round, and let me just very quickly uh, ask you that you are all coming from different walks of life, and we are all talking about AI. And let's say, as a layperson, may still ask what is AI. But I think as you mature this conversation, sooner or later it boils down to, do we have data? Because if we don't have data, we cannot build AI. And since you are representing different stakeholders here, can I ask you a very quick question? That what is your observation in last 6 months or so in terms of the data available? Has the amount of data in whichever setting you were in, like Dr. Vibha, for example, you were in a hospital, has the amount of data increased because of telemedicine, for example? Or you have any observation that it has not increased or whatever? And do you see any new emerging opportunities for which you could actually say that, okay, now we have data in this area, so hence, like Mr. PRK said, you can use AI in processes, you can use AI in making predictions about certain disease areas. So are there new opportunities coming because of the new normal? So starting with you, Dr. Vibha, and then we go to Mr. PRK, then Pranay, and then Rohit again. So, Dr. Vibha.
Yes. So, as Rohit mentioned, Sachin, we have been experimenting with these particular models in the startups in the field of AI, and particularly in the imaging. The reason for actually selecting this particular area was with our centralized RIS packs in our system, we were pretty much comfortable in terms of having the access of all the image data. In terms of, like, we know if there is no data, there is nothing we can like put on top of it, and AI is something which for which you need to have data at the base of it. So if you don't have any digital data, you'll not be able to put any AI algorithm over it. That's the area which we started working on. And when we explored, so there were challenges in the beginning. Challenges in terms of, it's not important only to have the data. You need to have a data which actually has to be curated then, because you need to understand what is the problem you're trying to solve. AI is not something which comes as a pill and then you just plug it and then you start using it. You need to understand in whichever setting you are trying to actually use that AI model or AI algorithm, you need to identify which is the thing which you are targeting. Either you are targeting to bring in some efficiency into your processes, either you're targeting to bring in some kind of a support or an aid to the already short workforce which you are having, or maybe you're trying to solve some complex problems in your whichever organization you're working. So as we are talking about healthcare, yes, there are humongous amount of data where we need to do calculations. And other than healthcare, I mean, there are other companies where you do that kind of calculations, the computations and all those kind of stuff. So the AI probably is working well in those particular areas. With regards to the increase in the size of the data, yes, definitely, since the emphasis in the last 6 or 7 months because of the pandemic has been on the digital platforms. So there has been mushrooming of the digital platforms. There are organizations who were probably not using that digital platforms. They did not feel the need for it. They were able to survive, right? But during this pandemic, there was a need for the digital. I mean, you did not have any choice. You cannot connect with the patient. You cannot go to the patients physically. You had to have some kind of measures over there. So in terms of the digital data which is available in the system right now, that has increased. The problem or rather the challenge which has come up is you have now more siloed clusters of data. So maybe in a chain of hospitals, like the way we are running, we probably have a bigger cluster of data. But there are small hospitals in Delhi NCR itself. Maybe there are other chains itself. But what you are having is data which is available, but then in silos and in clusters. So the main challenge whenever you're trying to put an AI algorithm comes up is how do you actually utilize all the available data? How do you manage to utilize the data which is available in clusters and have a centralized kind of a repository which is usable? It's not only important to have the data, it is also important to see how you can use that particular data. So that has been a journey with Cure, which we have been having for quite a long time. And that's the challenge, and that's where we kept on struggling with the things. But yes, to be very honest, Cure has been a very good kind of a startup. And that is where I think, as Pranay was pointing out, that we have got around 250, 300 applications in their NTHM or the Ayushman Bharat, this thing, and they are promoting the startup. And that is what we are looking for actually. Because one thing which has come up very clearly in the last 2 years, whenever we were experimenting with the AI startup companies and all those kind of stuff, there are like say 50 companies who will come up to you, but then you need to understand what are they offering to us in terms, because as a private organization, we don't have that much kind of resources to experiment, right? Probably a curator or a center of excellence wherein these startups can like do a sharing of their ideas and come up with a proper algorithm, that would be helpful. But for us, it becomes a little bit difficult to give them a kind of a very broad experimental platform. A first level screening definitely needs to be done somewhere. We definitely then can promote, because in terms of the data, yes, we do have that data. Again, and I think Mr. Krishnan would help us out over there. There are 2-3 very specificities when we come to the AI, building the AI algorithm. We need to have a data which is not biased, right? Which is not kind of giving you the information from just a single geographical region, maybe, or maybe a single kind of a case, because then that actually loses, the AI algorithm loses its benefit over there. There are n number of things which we can discuss, and I don't think so this is the forum where we are discussing how to create that AI algorithm, but these are practical problems. And these practical problems actually increase the time any AI startup would take to actually implement its product in a way it can be utilized. And once it is utilized as a minimum viable product, and then to scale it up to a level wherein it can be used to actually help the users or the workforce it is supporting to use.
Thank you, Dr. Vibha. So may I bring in Mr. PRK here? So what's your viewpoint on this?
So you have asked what's the starting point in this AI journey. I think Dr. Vibha pointed out about the data. I think it is ironic, but if you look at as a patient, if I have to tell my experience, you find that when you go to a doctor, a private doctor who's probably a family doctor who is not attached to any hospital, his knowledge is I'm looking at it from a perspective of technologist. When I go to such doctors, his knowledge is restricted to the number of patients he is able to handle. Then I go to a doctor who's attached to a clinic, his knowledge gets slightly broader because he's exposed to other types of diseases, other types of patients, and the way a hospital handles this is definitely different from a private doctor. Then you talk about a cluster, which is what. So okay, we get better data. So one of the experiments or pilots we did with the cancer hospital network of Tata Medical Research in terms of connecting almost 92 hospitals. It was not AI to start with. It was about data to start with. We essentially created a concentric data repository of all these hospitals and ensured that we have a continuum of data. It is about a patient's time series analysis, as we would want to call it. How has he improved, or what is the symptoms, how are they changing over a period of time, and that gets stored in a data repository so that the doctors across these hospitals can use the data. Now we are in the process of building AI algorithms on top of it, but this itself has taken us almost 5 years. I think it's 10 years, 2010 onwards. So like Dr. Vibha highlighted, the collection of data is probably the #1 priority from a healthcare point of view, and putting it in a structured data repository is where we spent our effort in the Tata Medical Research. The second aspect is primary health is another challenges we felt, and this is about patients moving from place to place during their life cycle, and the doctors should have a record of the patient. Like if a lady is pregnant and she is in Bangalore, for the pregnancy she'll go to her mother's house, which is in a village. We still need to ensure that the data is available over the period of 9 to 10 months, so that the pregnancy is taken care of. These are simple examples which we encountered when we went through this primary healthcare pilot, again with Tata Trust. And it was a successful experiment in the sense it has covered at least 3 million people within Karnataka, Telangana, and Andhra Pradesh. But these are all examples which addresses in a very narrow space. So we have an opportunity to use this kind of a model of operation for smaller companies. Like, because I'm talking about Tata's, it has got a broader reach, both in terms of hospitals, in terms of communities. How will we create the environment of startups to be able to get this kind of data is something what I call as enterprises and startups collaborating with the government acting as a catalyst could be one model which Mr. Praveen can probably put some light, throw some light on.
Yeah, I think excellent questions, sir. You have done my job. So I think you have posed the question that I was thinking, and probably I couldn't have done better. So Pranay, what do you think? Is there a role here for somebody like NHA to what I understood from Dr. Vibha and Mr. P.R. Krishnan, that data is the biggest hurdle to overcome, and for innovators to create value, they don't have to spend 5-10 years collecting data or putting it together. So what is your viewpoint on this?
Thanks, Sachin. And I'll just take the conversation ahead from where Dr. PRK left it. He was talking about industry and startup collaboration with government acting as a catalyst. And I think if you look at the broader mandate of the government, this is what government is capable of, right? Government can bring all the players at a single table and think about how do we improve the service delivery. So what I'll do is I'll give you an example of how AI has played a part in AI or ML has played a part in Ayushman Bharat PMJ. A couple of months down into the implementation of the scheme, we realized that prevention of fraud and timely resolution of fraudulent activities or any unscrupulous activities is of paramount importance. So what we did was we floated a POC wherein we had certain requirements pertaining to timely triggers that can be raised for any fraudulent activity that comes to the beneficiary life cycle, and how can they be resolved and how can they be communicated to the necessary stakeholders that are there in the ecosystem. And after the POC, we had around 5 companies who came and who worked in the NHA in order to conduct this POC. And of the POCs, one company eventually got the tender via the tender mechanism. One company is actually working with us in order to create that robust system in place. So this is a very simple example of how a POC is leading to a company being a supportive agent to the government in order to better its services. And if I talk about Ayushman Bharat PMJ, I think the 3 pillars that are there is pertaining to access, affordability, and quality. So this is ensuring that the timely fraudulent triggers are ensuring that we have a good compliance on the quality side of it. But at the same time, there are huge opportunities when it comes to bettering healthcare access, when it comes to bettering healthcare quality, and this can be any solutions which kind of fit into the value chain or the life cycle when a beneficiary avails a treatment. So, for example, if there are radiology solutions which determine which save time or which save costs in quick detection, eventually as a payer of insurance, this is benefiting our scheme, right? or if there are algorithms that are being built which kind of which can gauge the quality of the services that are being offered in terms of outcomes or in terms of value, right? So as an insurance payer, eventually a couple of years down the line, I think these are the indicators that are going to become prominently important, because it is a loss for an insurer if more and more people are just availing the services time and again without really focusing on what are the kind of services that are offered in terms of affordability and quality and in terms of access, right? So I think these are the broader avenues that that we at NHA have been thinking about on how to create these kind of systems. Now coming on, we were talking about data sharing, data security. I think the underlying boundary condition with which we work is that healthcare data uh, is a tricky slope in terms of, so you need to have those necessary protocols defined in terms of only anonymized data sets should be shared, and we need to figure out a mechanism, and if the private sector can help in co-creating that mechanism with the government, I think it is going to be it is going to be the best thing that can happen for the ecosystem in general. On the data part, there are two bills which are currently maneuvering in and around the parliament. You have personal data protection bill, and you have non-personal data protection bill that has also been in place and in discussions. I think with the passing on of these bills and with the discussions and with the help of the Supreme Court judgments, I think we should have some sort of a framework in the near future on how this data sharing mechanism is going to look like. Because ideally, if an anonymized data set is made available to the ecosystem, the benefits are manifold, because government in itself cannot be the be all end all solution provider, right? So our role has to be more as a facilitator or as a catalyst, as Dr. PRK was emphasizing on. And I think we are cognizant of that. It's just that I think it is going to be a collaborative process wherein governments and industry and startups, and not only these players but also academics, also researchers, these players will have a bigger role to play in order to create those frameworks which have necessary checks and balances, and which enable swift transmission of data without a lot of questions being raised. So I think these are the near-term future activities that that should be on our radar in the near term and the midterm.
Sure, Pranay. I think a lot of interesting thoughts come to my mind. Very quickly, I like to tell you that, my car got stolen in September, I don't know, 2017. So I thought, I want to solve this problem of cars being stolen. So we floated a, challenge in the Smart India Hackathon, that to read the car number plates using deep learning. And the
Right.
students did a very bad job. We did give away the money, but we were not happy. So we spent around 20 lakh rupees of our own, and we created a lot of data on cars. The next year, we went again to Smart India Hackathon. This year, we gave the money and we also gave the data. And we were mighty impressed with the outcome. So we have done this twice, this deep learning challenge twice. And when I study, this is non-healthcare example. So now we have a spin-off, which does the same thing on toll roads, right? Out of this challenge. But when I look at, different countries, like Netherlands has something called as Camelon challenge. Okay. So they put out pathology data, and anybody who's in the top 10, they get immense amount of funding. Then in Sweden, they are running as part of the AI.se, AI innovation of Sweden. They're running right now. AstraZeneca is running a drug discovery hackathon. So you can get 5,000 euros if you can find, which cell structure would be impacted, so and so forth. So when I see world over, uh, organizations like large corporates or governments have realized that competition driven, because the other bigger issue is procurement in, setups like yours, because tenders are not easy. But if you win a competition, you can prove yourself. And in a lot of societies in the world, if you win a competition, getting funding becomes straightforward because you can prove transparently that you are there. So at least in my personal journey, in the last 5 years that I've been looking at India-EU relations on various topics, I see that data labs is a definitely must. It can be across many areas in our society, health including one. And even in health, you can have hundreds of data labs, one just for radiology and so on and so forth. So let me bring in Rohit now. And Rohit, what is your reaction to this? Uh, when you look at yourself as a single company which has built very good solutions out of data, what is your viewpoint on doing open innovation, putting out data, and creating hundreds of cure, and maybe you guys can become a platform which can absorb these algorithms out of it? What is your viewpoint here?
Completely agree, Sachin. I think firstly, thanks for bringing that point up. Firstly, one thing I wanted to just make difference between is when you talk about data in an AI context, there are two sort of data points, two sort of data contexts. One is data that you use for training and making algorithms better, and obviously one that you use for actually running algorithm and sort of. So the data that you use for training and making those algorithms better is the one that is sort of in demand. That's the one that is obviously more and more data would help there. Now, in terms of open innovation, Sachin, I couldn't have agreed with you more. We have not seen this uh, play out to our advantage. For example, you mentioned about UK also, I think. So UK also did a very similar thing that they did a. So I think what Pranay was mentioning, I think there are some sandboxes that are being done, but in UK, for example, what they did was they took that sandbox and they built it to the next level, where they said that we're not just going to provide the sandbox, but we are also going to provide a huge amount of data that we collect from all these NHS trusts in UK, and we are going to put that up for anyone and everyone to sort of go ahead and apply, and then we'll so I'll tell you the reason why it worked out in our favor was because I mean we are an Indian company. I mean, in any which ways, if we had tried to do this in UK at a scale, it would have been very difficult. But because we could do that, we could, as an Indian company, we could prove the quality right then and there without sort of going through a lot of hassle. And that sort of, I mean, if you have to look for the best quality solution out there, there's no other way rather outside go and open innovation in that sense. So I completely agree with that. I think, and I also agree to what Pranay mentioned. I could also sense that sort of challenge, which is that government cannot be an end all. They can be the one who can be doing all of this by themselves. There needs to be that collaboration which needs to happen. Actually, and the PRK also mentioned about how this is being something that I think TCS obviously has that kind of capability which can actually make sure some of these things actually happen in real life. Because it's a huge infrastructure in getting all of this data. Needs to be a collaborative activity, obviously, at the end of the day. And I think we definitely would like to help in if that sort of if narrative does come up. We would absolutely be happy to help with the experience that we have had with some of these projects that were done in UK or other parts. And also, for example, vetting of the solution, right? I mean, accuracy of some of those things, I mean, in a technical sense of the things might not be always the best thing to sort of vet for. And, so that's something, since we have done that, we obviously would be happy to do that. And the last point that you mentioned is the most interesting to us as a company, which is running this as a platform and sort of absorbing solutions. So to that extent, we have actually looked at some of it already. So we are absolutely always happy to do that. The question obviously is that the extent that we have is a fairly limited access to data ourselves. So we cannot obviously be the ones uh, you know, supporting that in putting more data. But what we can definitely do is, since we have already done that and have an access to other places right around the world, some of this interesting and best algorithms that come up, we would be absolutely happy to provide them with the channels to reach out to a broader audience even outside India. That's something we would absolutely be happy to do that. I mean, and when that's and I think not just within market access, I think we can also help with the regulatory piece also. So that's something, again, within India, we have been sort of been able to do that first up. So some of those experiences that we have accumulated, we are absolutely happy to provide that. And I think we would like to definitely see more than hundreds. I think we want to see more of your companies coming out of India. We genuinely believe there's a lot of data. There's a potential for way more companies like us to come up in India than in other parts of the world. I think it's just about facilitating those kind of things to happen. And just I completely believe that kind of talent and the data we have in India is just unbelievable. So if we can capitalize, we really can win this game in India.
Thanks, Rohit. I think we have alluded to this point many times about the regulatory aspect. My understanding is that it is, traditionally it has been, drugs have been approved by the Ministry of Chemical Fertilizer, if I'm not wrong, Pranay. Then, medical devices also fall into that bucket. So when we look at AI as medical devices, I would like to hear from all of you. When somebody comes to you and says that, especially when it is in the clinical setting, not for processes and not for fraud detection. So how would you go about assessing them? So again, starting with you, Dr. Vibha. So when cure comes to you, of course, maybe cure comes with a FDA seal, but as you know, FDA is American, not Indian. Or somebody comes to you with CE from Europe. So what about Indian companies, Indian certification, or our assessment of these AI technologies? Where are we? And I would like to hear from all of you on this. So how do you treat this? So Dr. Vibha?
You've brought in a very pertinent question over here, Sachin, wherein you actually have compared a AI algorithm to a medical device, right? And the certifications we are talking about, the FDA certifications or the CE certifications, yes, we do believe these certifications help us a lot in terms like, look, in the clinical setting, whenever I'm using a AI algorithm, if it is like for an internal purpose of the hospital, wherein I'm just using that algorithm for probably increasing our operational efficiency or maybe increasing the productivity, which is not impacting the patient's life directly, that is something I think we can take a chance with. There is no problem. But whenever we are using an AI algorithm which directly impacts the patients, right? So when I am using an AI algorithm which is helping me to quickly diagnose certain things, maybe through the images or maybe in the off-health piece, maybe in the diabetic area, wherein when there are AI algorithm available, wherein they're used as a screening, first level screening for diabetic retinopathy, right? But when I'm using those kind of AI services or an AI plug at that particular moment, what I'm risking is I'm risking that services which is being provided to the patient. So when I am giving an AI aided service to the patient, as per my understanding and as to my knowledge, and I would be more than happy to hear from all the experts here, I don't see there is any regulation which tells me how to do that. So as of now, the onus of providing a fair diagnosis to the patient lies on the doctor who's providing that treatment to the patient. So if the doctor or the hospital provider who is using any AI aided service as a service to the patient, ultimately the onus falls on the either the hospital or on the doctor. If the doctor is using in his own private clinic, or he's using in the hospital and the hospital has provided that kind of an AI service. So that risk always is there. I am not sure that US FDA certification or the CE certification, are they like kind of good enough to help me tell, look, you can use this AI algorithm in a public setting, provide this particular AI aided service to the patient. If anything goes wrong, the AI algorithm is liable for it and not the doctor.
No, ma'am,
That is
I
something which
believe
is a very
that
far-fetched kind of a thing.
So I
That is
think
a
AI
very no. I
Doctor,
actually brought up this particular. I brought up this point, Sachin, because this was one of the questions I was asked. This was one of the question I was asked when I told them that at Max we are experimenting with AI services in radiology. That was a question was asked: are you providing AI aided service to the patient directly? So the answer was no. I'm not providing AI aided service directly to the patient. Ultimately, again there is a barrier. It is helping my doctor to aid the diagnosis, and my doctor is again responsible for providing that particular information to the patient. Now, when we talk about the certifications, that is a confidence I'm giving to my doctor, saying, ki, look, this particular AI algorithm, which we have deployed in our system, it is already certified, it is already accurate, and you can use it for your health.
I agree, ma'am. If we keep human in the loop, we can
Yeah,
overcome
we
a
have
lot
to.
of and using AI as a decision support versus AI as a decision making. There are two
Right.
different approaches. I think we are not yet ready yet for the AI as a decision making. But I think let me bring in Rohit here and ask Rohit upfront, how is Cure handling this? So you don't have a Indian mechanism for certifying the AI algorithms, Rohit. Is that correct?
That's absolutely correct, Sachin. I don't think the nearest you have is a CDSCO guidelines. I mean, not guidelines, that's just registration. That's about for devices. But there's no guideline or anything per se for anything in AI for as a medical device.
So when you go and work with clinicians in India, you must be getting the same kind of questions that Dr. Vibha is raising, correct?
Absolutely, we do. Absolutely, always.
So what is your typical response to that?
So there's firstly, I think we get not only that, so the questions come in few other variations, which are like, is it ICMR? Has ICMR approved it, or some like a medical authority? So thing to realize is ICMR is not primarily the one which is, I mean, gonna regulate. I mean, they're not the regulatory body. They're more of a policy slash advisory body in terms of medical devices per se, right? So firstly, that clarity is also not there in a lot of times when we interact with clinicians. I think so that's the first thing. So that we have to explain that who is the guiding regulatory authority, supposed to be regulatory authority in India. Then we also have to explain that what is the current status on this, and then we have to explain that which is a similar authority in say in Europe or in US and what their status is, and then explain them the entire scenario about how there's no absolute guidance in India, and then what that status looks like in Europe, and then how we sort of make the mandate there. So you have to explain the entire story, I think. Otherwise, it's very difficult for anyone to understand, what the regulatory scenario looks like within India. So I think we have to make everyone aware of that before they trust us. That's one thing. The second thing which Dr. Vibha mentioned, which I found very interesting, is I mean what she mentioned about, is there a way we're gonna use AI to like completely take the liability of sorts, right? I mean when things go wrong. So I mean, while this is absolutely something we all want to get there someday, we definitely want to make sure that there's something that we can provide in those senses where we liability on us. But at the same point of time, I think if you look at sort of outside, say, radiology, with things like, it's not called AI, but if you look at digital pathology for that matter, in that sense, you have had this kind of, I mean, today, if you look at digital pathology within India, I mean, all the reports are, if you do a CBC test or any of those blood count tests, all the test results are completely automatically generated, right? But still, at the end of the day, when you're signing off, you still need pathologists to actually look at the sample and say, I mean, they might not be actually doing it themselves, but at the end of the day, they still need a sign off. So I think, and that has been fairly existent over a very long time, and still we are not able to completely hand it off directly to a completely machine generated report, right? So I think if you just look at that journey, it probably also makes sense that within other spaces of healthcare, the hand up is not going to be absolutely easy, and neither should it be. I think I definitely don't think it should be something that should happen also in a very quick time. It should take its own course of time, and that means that there's some point of time before we end up in a situation where everything is completely, liability included is taken up by.
Thanks, Rohit. So, Pranay, just looping you in here, the NDHM sandbox. My understanding is, it is a bunch of APIs, which enables, let's say a third party to interface with this, health ID concept, if I may say. But let's say it doesn't, as of today, capture this essence. Imagine that, we had a solution from Rohit or Dr. Vibha or from Mr. PRK, and there could be 100 random X-ray, chest X-ray picked up from the NDHM sandbox, and the system would already know that 96 of them have COVID, for example. And let's say Dr. Vibha, Mr. PRK, or Rohit would not know that what is the accuracy rate or what is the ground truth. And running this API could actually benchmark or validate their AI's accuracy. So I don't know if we could have a similar sandbox, which of course you need to build hundreds or thousands of them, because each will be for one particular problem statement, right? So if government is organizing a big challenge on screening for COVID using chest X-ray, right? So people can build different kind of AIs, but they still need that ground data. So do you envision that, or would this never be falling into NHA's purview, and would be falling more into that regulator which is supposed to look at medical devices per se? Because I think sooner or later digital health will also require these kind of validation frameworks where people can actually go and like we take a GRE or a GMAT, right? Can my algorithm also take a test, and if I'm passing that test, there's some seal of confidence.
Absolutely. I think these are very pertinent points, what Dr. Vibha and what Rohit was mentioning. And building on the pointers that were mentioned, if we look at the history of regulation, even in the Western countries, it typically starts with medical devices. And then when you're going to software, so AI is again slightly far-fetched when it comes to the software domain as well, right? So in terms of software, you talk about a EHR platform or a HMIS system at the very least. So all these platforms in the Western countries concept, when we're talking about FDA, they are considered as a medical device. So there's actually a terminology called software as a medical device under which these initiatives fall under. Now, in Indian context, what had happened is that a couple of years back, there were only a few medical devices which were regulated by CDSCO. I think sometime early this year or late last year, what CDSCO decided is that by 2021, they are going to regulate all the medical devices that are there. So India is in a journey of covering the entirety of the medical devices that are there. And subsequently, once we finish this activity of medical devices, it is going to move towards looking at softwares. How do we include softwares? And when I'm talking about softwares as well, I think my hunch is that the initial bit is going to go on the easier, non-invasive things which are just adding to the process efficiency side, right, pertaining to HMIS systems, because want of regulation, though people feel that it has been a bane, but it is also a boon in some sense, because if you look at the regulatory gestation period in India, or in any country for that matter, it typically takes somewhere between a few months to a few years in order to get all those regulatory certifications in place. Versus in India, a company can register itself as a software company, get a HMIS system up and running, and place itself in a hospital within a span of a couple of months, right? So the want of regulations has actually provided an opportunity for a lot of software companies to come up and play a part in the digital health journey. But having said that, I think regulations are important, and as and when we're talking about patient journey, and when we are talking about things that directly impact the patients, I think regulations are going to play a far more important role. India is on a journey. Once we finish off the medical devices side, then we'll have to probably move ahead in order to cover the software and eventually cover emerging technologies such as AI-based solutions, ML-based solutions into the ambit, because that will prove that will take away in order to make procurement easier. Because if you're not regulated, it becomes very difficult for any government entity to procure, right? I think the second point, which was also being discussed, was on how these regulations lead to procurement, right? So one of the things that we have done as a part of NHA Innovation Unit is that we have, as an insurance payer, we pay money to public hospitals as well as private hospitals. We have little freedom on how private hospitals kind of utilize the money. But when it comes to public hospitals, we release guidelines on what can be the intended avenues in which public hospitals can utilize the money. So what we had done as a part of our efforts to bolster procurement is that we had said that 10% of the money that public hospitals receive should be utilized on innovations. And we had defined innovations in terms of digital health technologies. We had defined innovations in terms of biomedical devices. And we had created a more generic definition of innovation so that it could encompass a broader avenue of services that are being created in and around the country. So what we have done as a part of these guidelines is that we have opened around 700 crores market for the adoption of innovations in various Ayushman Bharat hospitals across the country. So I think as and when these regulatory pieces fall into place, the effort on procurement has already started, and National Health Authority realizes it, because we would want these solutions to be procured by the hospitals, because this is eventually going to help us either in bettering the access, or bettering the affordability, or bettering the quality of the services that we are offering. And this is where I think government is going to play a bigger role in enhancing the quality, in enhancing the healthcare delivery. Yes, Sachin.
So Pranay, we visited some Swedish hospitals last year, and one of the very successful ones, it's in Uppsala. So they have, I think, world's third rank incubator. Okay.
Right.
So they basically identify the need within the hospital, take it to the incubator, and build a company out of it. And hospital has equity in it. And Swedish healthcare is much like public healthcare. So it's like you can imagine AIMS or those kind of. The bigger problem when it comes to, mindsets is that, let's say, a hospital in Uppsala, for which everything is a cost, because it's a publicly run. So you don't have income. It's only cost. They are on a pathway where healthcare will generate a lot of revenue for them, because they have equity in some world-class companies. Okay. So they are turning healthcare from a cost to revenue, because they feel they can create world-class innovation, and this innovation equity with hospital is in billions of dollars. So when I look at these models in Karolinska or in Uppsala, I find here in India, you go and tell XYZ hospital that can you have equity in startup? I think they would have to move pillar to post to even think about taking equity in a startup. I recently went to Delhi Police. So Delhi Police has got 16 crores from Maruti Suzuki to put cameras on NH24. In Todapur, they have lot of, every day they get 30,000 images of cars, of Chalan. And they have a AI system which is very bad. And the police commissioner says that we want to solve these problems. I feel I can solve this problem, because those people in the Delhi police, they don't realize that they have hundreds of crores of data, which is waste for them. But it is very good for me to build AI. Okay. So when I go and tell Delhi police that why don't you invite 5 startups and they can solve your problem of the lakhs of images of data that you have of cars. This is not even healthcare. Okay. So they say that it will be an act of parliament for Delhi police to own equity in a company. So you would have to fundamentally change how government works for any innovation to happen. And I can tell you, after talking to the commissioner of police and many other people in that office, they're really struggling. They want that solution, but it will be an American company or an Hungarian company which can come and sell them, not an Indian startup which can get access to that data which is there in Todapur. So sometimes the lacuna lies not in, so the person wants innovation, the person is ready to give innovation, but the structure in which that government setup is doesn't allow anything to do with a private person. Hence, they cannot do any innovation there. So you may have to, seriously consider these procurement challenges, especially in the government setup. Otherwise, it only favors those which are, maybe slightly better positioned than startups. So
absolutely right. No, absolutely. I think you're hitting the right note. So when we are talking about procurement as well, I think there are two avenues, right? So there is procurement wherein government is the buyer, and there is procurement wherein hospital systems are the buyers. So when I was talking about the nudges that we have done the nudges for where the hospitals are the buyers in terms of a good medical device coming in, or in terms of good software solutions playing a part. So the procurement relaxations that we have done was as a part of the payer mechanism that we are working in the insurance bit. I think you're hitting the right notes when you're saying that when it comes to government ecosystem, because what happens is precedence plays a bigger role when it comes to government buying particular things. So you need to have some sort of a precedence. You need to have some sort of you need to show that you have certain number of personnel. You need to show that you have certain number of turnover. So all these avenues, what it does is it does not create a level playing field for startups per se. And the avenue to kind of mitigate that is there are certain examples across the country which can be looked into. So as I was talking about doing certain POCs, and in case in those POCs we find that a particular startup is giving us much better results than bigger companies, I think so then what it does it encourages government to have a slightly more confidence level with that particular startup as opposed to the other companies that are there. Because at the end of the day, it is the public money which is being utilized by the government, and you would want that public money to be utilized in as best way as possible. So POCs is one of the ways that can be looked into. I think the second point, which is something that government of Telangana has done, is that they had said that in terms of procurement for any government department, if a startup is applying for procurement, and if the overall numbers is say 100, the startup just by the virtue of being a startup is going to get 2.5 marks extra, or 3 marks extra, right? So these are the kind of avenues which are going to bolster a lot of startup and a lot of innovation activity that is going to be done in and around the ecosystem. And these are the kind of positive externalities that we at NHA Innovation Unit also want to emphasize, want to try and test and see what is the better mechanism. And I think I would also want to upload this to other panelists and the attendees for this session. So if there are positive incentives that you see which are going to attract these kind of startups to push innovation in the government ecosystem, I think we are all ears, and we would want these suggestions to come to us so that we can also prepare the machinery in order to think differently, right? In order to look at newer ways on adoption of innovation.
Thanks, Pranay. I think we definitely collect feedback and share with you if it comes any. So, Mr. PRK, over to you. Tata is a big ecosystem. You mentioned 92 hospitals. So, what is your viewpoint on getting this validated, certified AI? What is your viewpoint on picking innovation from India? How do you see this?
Yeah, so if I can make a corollary to what we had when IT was growing in India, when we had to go and sell software to overseas companies in Europe or US, the main channel was that we should be certified, either by ISO if it is Europe or by CMM if it is US. And that is where the trust is essentially from these institutions. So similarly, so that's why the customers trusted those institutions. So they said they can do business with these companies, though they are from India. And fortunately, what happened was the same standards were being adopted in India. So we did not have to get a separate certification for Indian companies for us to do business with the Indian companies. They accepted ISO because manufacturing has already adopted it. All of them adopted ISO. So it was easy for us to position ourselves in the Indian context. So similarly, this is my thinking. I may be totally wrong. So the panelists may comment. Similarly, in the case of India, while we will essentially want to create our own standards, we do have those standards. Can we adopt what FDA has adopted, and so that if anybody is like Dr. Rohit Ghosh's product is certified by FDA, will that be a baseline on which you build upon? I'm not saying you adopt it. At least you have a reference point against which you start measuring the products which are coming out of India in the healthcare field, and follow it. If you look at HIPAA, it is more from a healthcare insurance perspective. So there are certain best practices we can use from the international. I was reading a paper on Australia. while they will adopt the US standards of FDA, and they are doing it already, they still feel, the data says that 12% of the doctors still don't trust AI unless it is certified by a combination of research institutes or academia and the government. They feel business, they don't trust business because they make money. They trust government and research institutions because they have a different stake as to why they wanted to work. And so that's how that paper was explaining the Australian doctors' mindset. It's doctors and clinicians. So I think from a starting point or creating a baseline, we should probably use some of these best practices and go from there instead of rediscovering the whole thing all over again.
Thank you, sir. So there are a couple of questions coming right now from the participants, and one is from Dr. Deblina Bhattacharya. How can a hospital system promulgate efficiencies and success with AI?
So to answer this question, I'll take the things which we did in our hospital. Probably that helps Dr. Develina also. Look, for adopting the AI as an aid, as a support. I mean, it's not going to solve if there is a lacuna in your process already, right? So first of all, what you need to do, you need to understand all the processes which are there in your hospital, all the operations which are running in your hospital, and you need to actually assess the processes and the things which you are doing in the hospital as if you're doing it without the AI, right? If they're running successfully, and then you see wherein putting any AI aided algorithm will help you in bringing in the efficiencies. Probably there are, like, you're taking help from 4 or 5 people to complete a certain process, because that is the requirement of that process, and you can automate that process, or maybe you can example, I'll just give you a very basic example of doing the security checks on the people who are coming to the hospital as attendants or whatever. So there are AI technologies which run a facial recognition mechanism. We have we have seen some startups which have come up with the facial recognition AIs, which are running on the patients who are standing in the queue in the hospital at the front office, waiting for their turn to come, to see how that particular patient is getting, like, is he getting agitated or whatever. So these are the kind of areas, once the processes are in place, you'll be able to actually pinpoint where is the need for the AI in your hospital. And then you can actually choose the AI, see what problem it solves for you, and then you can probably help in implementing that particular AI. That actually becomes your starting point for implementing any solution based on AI. I hope that answers.
Thanks. I hope it answers the question for Dr. Deblina. So continuing this conversation further, so Pranay, you may not be aware, but recently InnovatorCLUB partnered with Public Health Foundation of India, and we launched a course on AI. So that's what Dr. VK Singh was mentioning in the beginning. So we have finished 2 courses, 2 batches. So in fact, Mr. PRK was the keynote speaker on the day 1, and Dr. Vibha Jain and Rohit both have been faculty in this course. So this was a 5-day course that we organized, and we have organized it twice. So in fact, I would say our experience in the AI domain is now, with 100 clinicians trained. So I want to ask this next question to 3 of them, and want to hear from them that, since a lot of clinicians asked you questions, so starting from Mr. PRK, that what did you learn from these 2 batches? What were the anxieties that we should address to, or any observations that?
The first session, at least, was addressing my anxieties because I was talking to a set of doctors and clinicians, and I was a technical guy, so I didn't know what to expect. So I got into it without knowing what I'm getting into. So from that perspective, yes, it was a very steep learning curve for me, which is the surprising part of the classes. Both the sessions were that the knowledge of the participants was, there are 2 sets of knowledges, I should say. One is where they are experts and they're already experienced doctors and clinicians. So there I felt there was certain skepticism and the anxiety as to how AI is going to help them. The same concern Dr. Vibha raised earlier in terms of who takes the accountability. That's the kind of skepticism I heard from the experience. But I also heard the eagerness or the curiosity of certain set of students who were probably looking at, is AI going to augment my capability, or should I specialize in AI to become something else down the line? In fact, some of the students called me in one-on-one and asked me, what should be my career path? Should I specialize in AI and leave healthcare? I said, that's not the intent of the class. You should be converging both the capabilities. That's the best of both worlds, is what my advice has been. Because we have had experience in software industry where we took manufacturing guys and made them software programmers. I don't think healthcare can afford that. Yes, manufacturing has suffered because of that. And I don't think we should do the same mistake, is what I have been advising. So that's a big learning for me, that people, I have done MBBS, can go and do MS in AI? That's the question some of them were asking. So that is a bit surprising and shocking. So I had to dissuade that should not be the case. So my experience and learning in these two sessions have been very mixed, but I should say I'm much wiser how to address the audience if I get another chance to address the audience.
Sure, Dr. Vibha, what's your takeaway from the two sessions?
So, as Mr. Krishnan said, it was a very good learning and a very enriching experience, actually, to be on the other side. Honestly speaking, I've always been on the other side, listening to the faculties coming in. It was my first chance, actually, to be in such a position wherein to like tell them. And honestly, it brought in a lot of kind of a responsibility and accountability in what we are telling it to the people. One thing which actually intrigued me, and I'm very positive and very happy about it, is the groups contained people from all generations, right? There were young students, there were elder doctors and senior clinicians, I mean, at very senior posts and all. One thing which was common and which actually probably brought them to the single platform was their eagerness to adopt technology in healthcare. That is one thing I've been actually working towards for the past 10 years. And this is one thing which actually delighted me a lot, because all of them were wanting to use. I mean, that was the basic thing. They wanted to use technology in healthcare. That was the premise. So no questions on that particular part. Now, how to use the technology, which technology to use, definitely. I mean, everybody would have a different kind of a take over there. And so, and that's something which Mr. Krishnan, I would like to meet the doctor who wants to pursue the course in AI. I would definitely persuade him to do that. That will bring in a lot of, I mean, I think good information to healthcare, because honestly, nobody understands healthcare as a healthcare worker who's in the industry. And if that person is actually wanting to go ahead in technology and put it back to the use in healthcare, we'll get a very enriching,
exactly,
very get enriching. But overall, Sachin, it was a very enriching experience. Very nice.
Definitely, Dr. Vibha. I know at least half a dozen doctors. Some of them were also involved in our course, who are a clinician
Yes.
and have done a PhD in AI. Pritesh is there and many others. So why I'm asking this kind of a feedback, because I see that a lot of people who are coming from a strong clinician background, they are once they have understood a bit about AI, that is the first anxiety that they have, which way they should go. And there is, of course, no, standard answer for everyone. So depending on one's own interest, they may take AI full on. But, I just wanted to get your feedback. Let me also bring in more feedback from Rohit, and then I will try to loop in Pranay here. So Rohit, what was your assessment of interacting with those 100 clinicians?
For me also, it was exactly almost similar like what Mr. PRK mentioned, which is that I primarily come from a technical background. That's one. The second challenge was initial days of cure. We have, let's just say, we have not had the most very interesting and pleasant conversations with physicians. I mean, in very early days, right, where people would tend to be a lot more skeptical. And from there onwards to what we saw on the session, I think I was extremely, just enthusiastic by the kind of people were showing encouragement and they wanted to jump onto the scene. So that was absolutely amazing. I've never actually seen that to that extent, and specifically from physicians who wanted to do that. So that was interesting. The only thing that sort of, I mean, struck me was the fact that obviously there are a lot of enthusiasm to get into the sector and get the AI piece, and everyone wants to sort of have a role to play with it, right? But some people want to sort of use it, people want to build it. I think what sort of I was trying to elucidate this also on the seminar is that people a lot of times in the enthusiasm we are not thinking more about what actually is helpful for the end user or the patient, right? And you just there's a enthusiasm and you want to sort of just get started with doing something, which obviously is good to sort of start off with, but in a slightly longer period of time, it might be helpful for every physician to actually look at what problems they're facing on their day-to-day, which can be solved, right? Rather than sort of looking at the most cliche or the ones that already exist. So that's the only thing that I strongly think might be helpful for every physician, because I've seen this in other parts of the world. I know a lot of physicians, for example, in UK or in Europe, who just build their own. They work in their normal 6 to 8, whatever. They have 2 hours, I think, off every day to sort of work on such kind of academia projects. They build their own systems. They build that for their own hospital, and then so I think for that's a kind of innovation which actually would truly change, because then people are building it for their own use case, which actually has a lot more impact. So if we can get people to do that, that would be the most fantastic thing we can get out of a session and course like.
Right. So I don't know if in India we have an official number of doctors, Dr. Vibha. I don't know it's 1 million or 500,000, but I think nobody has the official figures. But let me tell you a short story. One of my professor from University of Helsinki, in 2018, he decided that he wanted his country to do AI. So he designed a course called as Elements of AI, made his president of Finland to do that course. After 1 year, 4% of Finnish population did that course. So in 1 year, a single-handedly one professor educated 4% of the country. Then they sent one of the minister from Finland to Sweden, and they challenged Sweden. By December 2019, 1% of Sweden did this same course. It's called Elements of AI. Then Finland was the president of EU, so they gifted it to EU. By 2021, 1% of the European population would be done with this Elements of AI course. Now my professor has released a follow-up course. It's called Building AI. So if I look at it, my professor's point of view, it takes only one person, and I think it's a 32-hour course or something, and he has done a wonderful job. Of course, Finland is not very comparable to India, because of course it is only 5.5 million people, and 35% people are with master's degree. So it's not very comparable in that sense, but I think there is a lot of inspiring ideas. So why I want to bring this to you, Pranay, the point I wanted to make was that when I see countries like Finland or other countries, they are doing this at a level where they feel that there is a sense of mission and there is a sense of urgency, that we need to get our entire population familiar with this, because it's going to change their life. So I don't know, when in India we will have that sense of mission and urgency. But with our small experiment of, working with PHFI, we did one course on cybersecurity for healthcare and 2 courses on AI. So I can see that there is a lot of interest, but we don't have a central platform wherein we can say, I can make this course, for example, and put it, let's say, on the NDHM platform. So can the entire India, or at least all the clinicians, do that course on their own? So I think we are yet to experience, ideas in that way, because MOOCs have become such a easy way to consume education today, that they have really become mainstream. But I think you should also consider that building skill set in clinicians, especially if you look at the NHS example. So NHS hired Dr. Eric Topol to write a report. It's called Topol Review, on the need gap for the AI skill set within the UK doctors. So I don't know if in India we are looking at digital in that same way while we launch National Digital Health Mission. Maybe we can also come up with small courses, which can be floated on the NDHM portal. And if I am a doctor who happens to go there, maybe I can do a certificate, and say that I know about digitization in healthcare XYZ. I don't know what's your point of view, but I'm definitely happy to contribute on AI and cyber.
Absolutely. And before I venture into my point of view, I just wanted to kind of congratulate all of you on taking up this brilliant initiative, because the doctors that are being trained are not only going to is not only going to lead to better information symmetry in the ecosystem, but these are going to be the champions tomorrow, right? And you are going to spearhead the movement of making this information symmetry percolate across the ecosystem, and AI wouldn't be seen as a black hole or a beast in itself that nobody understands, right? It is very important for people to understand that this is going to become a norm, right? This is going to become a norm in a couple of years. So it is better that we understand the nuances of it, that we understand the possibilities of it, and we understand the boundaries of it. So I think the avenues that you're doing, not only for AI but also for cybersecurity, I think these are very pertinent indicators. And this also ties in with the innovation unit's mission, right? Because when we are going to doctors, we have seen that doctors who have had some sort of a history, or who have some sort of a understanding in how innovations can lead to better healthcare delivery, they are more forthcoming. So this is also creating a network of key opinion leaders who are then going to be the stalwarts in their respective fields, and they are going to take this agenda forward. And I believe that courses like these, now coming to the second question that you asked on how can the courses like these be actually percolated to the entire ecosystem. So there are two things that I can think about. I think while this is extremely important for the doctors who are already in service, but this is also very important for the medical professionals who are currently doing their studies. Because what happens is, a lot of medical professionals are so fixated in the medical processes side of things that there are fewer technology courses when it comes to the typical MBBS duration. And it is important to sow these seeds at the earlier stages, because technology and clinical integration is going to be the future, and people and the clinicians who are more amicable to technology are going to be the champions, are going to be the next public health champions, are going to be the next clinical champions. So I can think of a particular platform that MHRD had initiated about 10 years back. It is called NPTEL. So NPTEL, it started with engineering courses, right? But it then moved ahead into creating management courses, and now it also has a medical courses section. So I think while NDHM website could definitely have certain knowledge resources pertaining to various NDHM avenues, I think a broader reach can be ensured by a platform which is fixated and focused totally towards MOOCs. So I think this might be a good medium to take the things that you're developing and scale it at a national level.
So I have a question for both Pranay and Sachin, which is sort of in relation to this particular piece, which is that in terms of percolating this, do you think, I mean, I'm sort of taking the example of how NHSX did it and UK, right? I mean, just sort of creating the MOOCs, is it enough to percolate this kind of a knowledge to a wider audience, or do you think you need a sort of clinical champions in itself to champion? Because this is not like a normal, this is something which is coming up, right? So it's not like everyone would sort of have a very good inclination to do it right away or take this up. There's no incentive for people to take that up right away, right? So is there a way, for example, do you need some clinical champions whom you identify beforehand and use their experience to go to a wider audience, right? For example, someone like Dr. Vibha, who's been using the AI already. So people like who have already been using AI, people who are in a position to use AI in different parts of the country and use them to actually percolate that.
So from my experience in the startup and the innovation space, I think KOLs play a very, very important role when it comes to healthcare, because people kind of look up to their colleagues, people look up to the luminaries, the kind of things that they say, the kind of things that they do. So that is why I think I was coming to the point wherein the network of champions that you are creating, that you have created in the last two courses, they are going to tell it to their ecosystem in saying that they have done a certificate in AI, and when they propagate the benefits that they have received, I think it's a domino network effect, and it is going to reach a tipping point, after which everybody in the ecosystem is going to feel the need of doing this particular course. So I think demand-driven intervention is extremely important. It is not merely just putting a course on a Coursera or a Udemy or a NPTEL. I think it is important to have those demand-driven initiatives in place, and testimonials, case studies. I think these are important indicators that kind of help you propagate the message further. So, for example, by the virtue of the course, if certain medical professional would have incorporated some benefit of AI into their clinical thing, that could become a good case study, and that could become a very strong testimonial to clearly elucidate the benefits of that particular course. And for a person who is indifferent to the mechanism, once they understand that this is what was done, it is very easy for them to put themselves in the shoes of somebody who has done it all, and think about the benefits that can be received by the virtue of doing this course. So this is something that we are also doing in the innovation space, wherein we are looking at early innovation adopters and looking at case studies, which can create a good narrative on how adoption of innovation actually leads to better outcomes. So I think I see a lot of synergies between what we are doing and how the AI information symmetry mission in India would manifest, in my opinion.
Fair enough. Makes
So, did that answer your question, Rohit?
Yeah, to a good extent. I think I sort of agree what Pranay mentioned, which is I really like the word AI information asymmetry, which we need to sort of bridge the gap there. Absolutely agree.
Right, right. And I think from my point of view, when I'm curating such a course, I'm always looking for, next Dr. Vibha Jain. So, if people who are participating, they come forward, they come up with their idea, next bright idea. For example, in the first batch, we had one Dr. Sanjay from Bangalore, and he's working on diabetic foot. So he is looking at, scanning of the wound of a diabetic foot and coming up with the dressing suggestions. So this is a app, which is useful in his work. He doesn't want his patients to travel in COVID, and they can remotely inspect the wound. So I can see a lot of clinicians from these courses, they have bright ideas, and I also don't expect them to develop the entire solution by themselves, but some are hiring interns. They only need certain guidance that they and the intern can actually are able to communicate to each other. And I found most of them, the problem lies not in the technology per se, but in the amount of data available. So most of them are going to face a big hurdle in their journey, which is that the problem that they want to solve, do they have the data for it? And it's only the clinician who can solve the problem. It's not the technologist who can solve the data problem,
Exactly.
because it's in their context, where data exists. But let me take this to the last concluding question for today, and where I want really this panel to put like a jigsaw. So starting with you, Rohit. So you have India's one of the largest company, as TCS. I don't know, it keeps changing by market share, whether it's Reliance or TCS, but one of them is always leading the stock market. So is TCS your ideal partner, NHA your ideal partner, or Max Healthcare your ideal partner? What is the scheme of partnerships that you suggest that would benefit startups like Cure in India?
Now, this is what is you make me answer very difficult questions, Sachin. I mean, you can't make me choose. I mean, all of them are equally as helpful a partner. I mean, it's everyone has got their own role to play. But if if I have to still pick one, I mean, just for sake of making this more interesting for you and sort of answering this question in that sense, obviously, someone like Dr. Vibha is probably more, helpful in terms of sort of, as Pranay mentioned, right? So Pranay is obviously gonna work with us only when they know that this works in a Max or a certain place where someone has used this. And so is Mr. PRK gonna reach out to us and say that, okay, let's use this to scale to say a bigger hospital. So I think it's always important to have. I always say this to all our, for anyone who's starting out, it's important to have someone who can, like Dr. Vibha, whom we can work with, whom you can actually, who can support you with that clinical case study that Pranay was referring to, Mr. PR. So that sort of usage is where it's primarily the most important. So if you're building something out, AI innovation, you want to build that out as anyone else, I would always suggest first, show where it actually works, right? I mean, where it actually works, it get some efficiency, get the regulations in place. All of those are very important. And once those things are in order, then you can obviously take it to an NDHM or take it to a TCS to scale that up. But to scale things up, you need the first kind of ground evidence.
Right, right. So I think I just like to add one last story. So this is from AstraZeneca. So they have Mr. PRK. They have a bioventure hub in Gothenburg, and we visited them, and they shared with us their case study that they have incubated 30 SMEs, not startups, in last 5 years. Their case study was discussed in World Economic Forum, because they have created out of those 30 SMEs 5 unicorns in last 5 years. For their own sales, they have created $17 billion patent value to $55 billion patent value. So they are now spreading this model. Volvo and ExxonMobil are copying this model. So the essential aspect or DNA of this model is that you take a big company, like a really big company like AstraZeneca. Indian equivalent could be a Tata or a Mahindra or whatever, and you find unrelated SMEs to your domain and you put them in the one campus. So AstraZeneca had, one plot which was laying empty. Now they have sold it to the one billionaire in Sweden who is building a health city. So these companies are becoming bigger within AstraZeneca office, and they're moving to the health city. So 1/3 money is paid by the Swedish government, 1/3 is paid by the Gothenburg city, and 1/3 is paid by this Swedish billionaire, because his real estate is being filled up. It's called Gothenburg Health City. So I was so amazed by this model of value creation, that these guys are, making companies bigger by, like speed of light. I believe a Max Hospital, because it's a publicly listed company now, or a TCS can also do a similar thing in India. I don't know if you have considered these topics seriously, but in one of our club meeting, we had Dr. Rath from Esther Hospital, and he mentioned that Esther is launching a $50 million fund for digital health. So I really believe, of course, what NDHM can do is, is there. But I also believe in countries like India. If you look at countries like Nordics, larger companies can also take smaller ones together. I don't know what's your point of view. So over to both of you.
Can I take that first?
Yes, sir, please.
Sure.
So I had mentioned this example in a previous forum. Is TCS has got what is called as a co-innovation network. Essentially, all startup companies and TCS work together, and then we go to the customer together. That's a model we have for not keeping innovation to ourselves, but also be able to work with smaller startup companies. That is one model. The second one, which is piloted along with MIT Labs, is what we call as a digital square. It has been set up in Nashik. So it is a completely non-profit, purely 100% investment by TCS. We had sponsored around 300 plus students. The students came and joined, and they came with an idea. Those are only 2 investments they made of themselves. Out of these 300 plus, each one of them came with an idea, and it was mentored by people from TCS. And I should be happy to say that at least this was a pilot which we had tried it out. 6 of them have already incubated that company and they are in the growth mode, 6 in different ideas. It was not focused on healthcare alone, but the intent of this was the same intent which Dr. Sachin Kaur said just now, what they had done in Gothenburg. In a smaller scale, experimented with our own partners, which is MIT Labs. So we have set up this center, and I would be happy to share the details so that how can we scale it beyond where it is today, and is there an opportunity for focusing on healthcare as one area and AI, that kind of a combination, can it be done? Is something I can get the details. But definitely we have the kind of ecosystem where we can nurture a startup company, work with them, and if they need scaling help, TCS can provide that, or if they need customers to be brought in, we take them to the customers. So there is an ecosystem which works like that, led by our CTO. So I would be happy to introduce them. This is definitely something I want to personally pursue based upon the conversation I had now as well as what I had in the previous sessions. So I would collect data and be happy to share with you, Sachin.
Oh, sure, sir. We, as Dr. VK Singh mentioned, we run this not-for-profit initiative, and this our community right now is around 86,000 people. So these are people like Dr. Vibha, Rohit, all well-meaning entrepreneurs or experts, but everybody is looking for a platform. So if anything, which comes from your side, which can absorb innovation, I think you will find a lot of people. Dr. Vibha, over to you.
I think that's going to be the concluding remark for the day, Sachin. So I would just like to actually mention that first of all, thanks to all the panelists for such a heartwarming and a very enriching kind of a discussion which we had. And to tell you very honestly, and these are my personal views as of now, Sachin. Uh, as a clinician who is very keen on in technology, I would actually like to work on a platform wherein our TCS person from NDHM and a startup is on the same platform. Because I mean that is a very kind of a collaborative platform. No one can do anything alone as of now. And as we are trying to actually improve the healthcare, there have been very encouraging information which has been shared by Pranay in terms of like definitely we can see that there are healthcare reforms which are coming in, right? The things which we are talking about are like things which have never been talked about, and it's not only talking about those things, there are actions happening and we can see those actions. So when we talk about the NDHM, we know that there is a pilot going on in 7 UTs and states for that particular NDHM. And to tell you also, Max Healthcare has also participated in a small POC by the National Cancer Grid, and that was spearheaded by Tata Memorial Hospital. So that's a very kind of a small POC wherein we collaborated to actually do a POC for an NCG fiduciary, wherein a patient, a cancer patient who is going to any of the hospitals across India, having his health records in any of the centers and across India, he's actually is able to link all those kind of records with him. So that's one thing which actually helps us also, that not only working in a private organization, we are also able to contribute to betterment of the lives of the patients as well. And that's a very good kind of a POC which we did. And to tell you very honestly, it was kind of successful. We were able to link the records of the participating hospitals. We could see that particular result. Having said that, we definitely would like to collaborate with startups like Cure. We definitely would like to collaborate and do things which can help better the life of the patients with TCS. And as far as Pranay, he represents me, the government of India. Uh, as of now in this particular panel, but what I see a very good a structure, a platform wherein all the private and the public players are brought together onto a single platform, wherein that particular thing is coordinated by the government of India with some clear guidelines. I mean, I'll not say that everything should be clear from right from the beginning, but then maybe taking help from the best practices in terms of like, if I have implemented EHR, we have taken help from HIPAA. So my solution is HIPAA compliant, for example, or maybe in HL7 certifications, Cure is now FDA and CE certified. So that is something which kind of gives me the trust. But then in order to approach the clinicians, in order that technology which we are exploring in Max Healthcare does not get limited to Max Healthcare only. I mean, the aim is not to have that exclusively for Max Healthcare. That technology can be used by anyone, right? Ultimately, is going for the betterment of the patient. And as Pranay pointed out, the things which they are trying to is access, affordability, and the quality of the care which is given to the patient. As a provider, what I'm trying to do is fairness, accountability, and transparency, bringing that to the operations. And I think all of these combined together, and if the mindset is like that we want to do something for the betterment of the patient, a conglomeration or a platform wherein we can discuss ideas, we can be in touch, see which can work for us. Because as Rohit mentioned, I mean, you need somewhere to see that the solution works. You need to have a platform where you can see that whatever we are envisioning or whatever, I mean, before settling on to Cure, we actually had to explore a lot many startups so that we settled on it, because we knew that we can go ahead and there was something. But then if I have something coming from, say, TCS, look, these are the 6 startups who are there in this particular field, and if you want to experiment with any one of that, we have done a preliminary kind of a screening, and it will be helpful for you to like do it if you have a problem in that particular area. That is definitely going to help the provider, the patient, and ultimately the healthcare. That's my sense.
Thank you, Dr. Vibha. I think you did a great job of summary, so I don't have to repeat. And I'm really grateful to all of you to come forward, share your valuable time. I hope participants also enjoyed, this conversation. I have been also asked by Dr. VK Singh that our next magazine issue is on digital health. So the magazine articles will close, submissions will close in 2 weeks. So we welcome your articles on the topics like today, linked with digital health. So if you have any, you know, thing in preparation, please send it to us, and we will be happy to publish it. So with that, I would be thanking you again. Thank you, Pranay. Thank you, Dr. Vibha. Thank you, Mr. PRK. Thank you, Rohit. I hope you all enjoyed. I really enjoyed the conversation, and I look forward to coming back to you in future with more concrete ideas and hoping that we can do a good job for India. Thank you.